Greetings, all, and welcome to another episode of the Enterprise Edge podcast. I am pleased this day to be joined by Ashesh Badani. He is the Chief Product Officer at Red Hat. We are coming to you in the middle of World Cup here in the United States. Exciting times, but this is also going to be exciting to listen to Ashesh's perspective. Red Hat, his company, was here in Atlanta not long ago, about a month ago, for the annual summit that Red Hat puts on. And so lots to pull from that. Ultimately, my point of view is that the message that Ashesh and his team delivered was that, the enterprise tech world really needs to start looking at scalable enterprise AI that's also governable and economically sustainable through the lens of infrastructure, right? And open source in some of the areas that Red Hat has been leading the way on for many years. And as most of you know, I'd like to say that Red Hat needs no introduction, but I don't want to make an assumption, but Red Hat has been known for a long time in the open source space, known for enterprise Linux and OpenShift Kubernetes, and Red Hat has been offering services and support and solutions to literally millions of companies that run their infrastructure on them. And they've been an independent unit within IBM since the acquisition in 2019. So a little bit of background. So before we get too much further, I'd like to give Ashesh a proper welcome. So Ashesh, thanks for spending the time with us today.
Well, great to be here, Mark. Thanks again for having me on and talking about the World Cup. I did actually manage to catch a World Cup match last weekend here in the Boston area. Hope you did. Hope you did as well.
I'm going on Wednesday. But which I have to ask, which match did you see?
Great atmosphere. We've got the Scots in Boston, so it's been a pretty wild time around here.
I love it. They've transformed that city for a short period of time. That was awesome. Well, good stuff. Yeah, it's an exciting time. Transcends a lot of the challenges that we're having as a nation, so it's great. Fantastic. Well, let's jump in. Ashesh, you've been with Red Hat a while, but if you go back far enough, you were with Sun Microsystems, obviously picked up by Oracle, and you've lived through, I'm not going to say the same story, but you've lived through a version of, you might say, one company's, pretty big technology bet, being kind of subsumed by another. And I just wonder, are there any lessons from your time at Sun that you still have and you still apply at Red Hat today?
Yeah, great question, Mark. And it's funny because if you've been in the business for a while, you obviously have been. I'm sure many of your listeners have as well.
Mm-hmm.
You find that in technology, maybe even more so than so many other industries, you make the wrong choice from an architecture perspective, or you miss, an upcoming, like wave or a market shift or a step function change of some kind, which in hindsight seems remarkably obvious, but the time that you're in it, right, isn't. It comes back. And it haunts you, right? And so, I mean, we don't have to sort of replay history too much. It's probably pretty far back for maybe even some of your listeners here, right? But the change that we went through collectively as an industry with regard to x86 and moving towards a much more standardized architecture. Look, Sun Microsystems lived through that, right? And so there's much to be said on that front. The other one was obviously, along with x86 came Linux running on x86 and becoming extremely popular across industry, especially in the core customer base that Sun had, right? Financial services firms. And then going away from Solaris on Spark, right, over to Linux on x86. And that was a big change. And, you could argue, and I think, we did even back in the day, saying, look, the performance, characteristics here, were so much more superior. But, that sort of combination of performance over cost that over a period of time that open source, eventually won out on, right, was something that Sun was on the wrong side of.
Yeah.
And consequently, the company struggled. So look, I have the fondest memories and the best feelings for Sun. And in fact, I feel like a lot of that culture at Sun
Mm.
around openness and meritocracy and being able to collaborate and work together, across a wider community, that sort of little bit of an irreverence that Sun had. I feel like a lot of those characters carry over into Red Hat. And you'll see a lot of people, who've got like a Sun kind of heritage, right? Have
Yeah,
found themselves at Red Hat. So I really like that.
that's great. That's great. That's great. I mentioned the Red Hat Summit here in Atlanta, which was phenomenal, by the way. I was there in May. It was just last month. It feels like it was longer ago, but um, I saw you on stage a couple times, a couple panel. They put you to work while you were there, and I saw you fielding Q&A, a lot of stuff, and I'm just curious. And by the way, you've been on the road a lot, as anyone in your position would be, and I'm curious, like, what's one question that maybe you've gotten from an audience or a customer recently that caught you off guard?
Ah, caught me off guard. So, look, there's a lot of talk about AI, right? And
Hmm.
so, look, you can't go to a tech conference anymore, not have a conversation about AI and what your position should be around it. You can't talk to customers really anymore without having to talk about AI. But having said all of those things, once you sort of get deeper in, right? Forget the first 15, 20 minutes. Once you've sort of, in the 2 hour plus conversation with the customer, there's still a lot of the same old challenges, right? That you have in place. And, you know, I don't know why I'm saying it in a surprise manner because, obviously you can't expect it to sort of magically disappear, right? These, infrastructure that have been put in place, especially with some of our largest customers, right? Whether financial services or telcos or public sector or retail or energy and all of these industries, they've been building out infrastructure over decades, right? And that's still in place. They still want to take full advantage of it. They still have a lot of folks, right, who've got certain sets of skills. Of course, they're focused on trying to make sure that they're skilled and ready to be able to take advantage of everything that AI can bring them. But they still have to address all the existing requirements, all the existing integration that they have, make sure that they've put a platform together that's ready to receive these new workloads while still managing the old. And so, that's not necessarily surprising, but that's a real tension that's in place. So, in some sense, if you spend a bunch of time, in Silicon Valley, or you talk to companies who are sort of, Silicon Valley native, and you get really caught up with AI fever, if you will, and then you go and have these conversations with, I'll just call them, more traditional, companies right across the United States, but really all across the world. You really have to sort of put those two, in balance and sort of have a good perspective on just where we are in the world right now.
Right. No, that's good. That's good. Good wisdom. Well, we've got, gosh, we could go a lot of different directions, Ashesh. We have a short period of time, but I'll see if I can steer us to what I think might be helpful for our listeners. And one of the areas I'd love to get your thoughts on is what I guess the headline on this one might be: token economics, right? As you, I think, I've heard you talk publicly about inference optimization, token economics, hybrid multi-cloud agentic workloads at scale, right? Not in some sort of pilot environment or proof of concept environment. And in my interaction, in my line of work, I interact with a lot of enterprise leaders that are still trying to figure out like their first AI use case and what it means in production, right? They're pretty early. And I'm not going to say that that's everyone, but I would say a lot of people are still in that camp. And so I'm curious if we could just kind of break down, like, the terminology, think about this as like key terms, token economics. What does that actually mean? And why do you think CIOs should care about that right now?
Yeah, great question, Mark. And let me try to answer this. Like you said, right? This is a sort of a big question. We can go many different ways with it.
Yeah.
I'll try to do a quick historical context and then sort of bring us to where we are,
Yeah.
and then weave in some customer insights.
Yeah.
So, this Red Hat Summit, right? We clearly talked about inference optimization a lot, right? And so I'll
Yeah.
get to tokenomics there. Let me just flash back to 2 summits ago, right? So two
Hmm.
summits ago, we had this whole conversation around fine tuning and tuning models better and making sure that these models that we use were fit for purpose and case and there was a lot of talk in the industry about that. at that point in time. And so we leaned into that and so trying to do that in an open source way. And then, across industry, right, across customer base, across industry, the providers of technology, they came to the realization that it's really expensive to go off and build a foundation model,
Right.
right? And really, there's only a few companies in the world that are going to be building, these foundation models. Oh, and by the way, when they do get built up, they're going to commoditize pretty quickly, right? Once you effectively slurped up the world's information, there's
Right.
not a whole lot more value in trying to do anything differently post that point in time. And so if we were to agree on that, right, and that there's going to be, a class of, proprietary models, there's going to be, a class of some, open weight types of models, and customers are going to use, some combination of that and become smart with regard to how they use that. Well, then the conversation will rapidly turn into how can I actually focus on the inference part of that, right? As I'm using it, how can I become more and more efficient with regard to the use of information that I get on it? Uh, Underlying infrastructure is expensive, right? All the way from NVIDIA chips to the servers that they run on, everything that surrounds it is expensive, right? Building these models and in over a period of time, the advancement of the models and being able to manage that, that's expensive as well. And so if you can really focus on how I can, become much more efficient with regard to the costs I have on the inference front and optimize that, well, that will make it much more powerful. Okay, so we agree with that way of thinking. We went off and bought a company called Neural Magic. We talked about the work that they're doing to effectively help the industry adopt standards like vLLM and LMD to be able to do inference optimization
Mm.
in a much more efficient, open manner as possible, right? So just like how Docker containers and Kubernetes became the de facto standard to be able to run cloud native containers and applications at scale, this would be the way to be able to do the same, but for inference.
Mhm.
So that sort of was the broad-based thesis that we had last year. This year we went even deeper into that, right? And we started talking about agents, but before we get to agents, this idea of tokenomics, right, started coming to the fore. Mostly because more and more companies start realizing, well, there's a lot of great work that's being done by the frontier lab. We can have access to these models and we can start using them. But when we use them, right, we now have choices we can make, right? There are some responses getting faster. There's some more reasoning that these models can do. Some have advanced capabilities. Based on how you use them, you can get output from it. But the more you use them, the more expensive it starts to become. Okay, so now there's a balance to be had, across this front. At Red Hat, internally, we started a project ourselves, right, to be able to, and I think, Mark, if you probably caught this in the keynotes, we talked about that, right? About
Mm.
how we can take effectively the knowledge that we have within Red Hat and use that to be able to make better decisions, right? So how can we take the work that's done across the entire company, not
Mhm.
just in technology, right, but in every department, right, whether it's finance or legal or operations, be able to pool all of that and then be able to query that information that we put in place and be able to not only make better decisions about how we're doing today, but also help us make good decisions about how we want to invest and go forward in the future. To do that, we built our own framework to go off and address that, as you would expect for us to do. And then we started realizing, we were using these, frontier models in the beginning, and then realizing, wow, our costs are going up, quite a lot. And then we start realizing, hey, look, for some of these queries that we're putting in place, we don't actually need to use a top-end frontier model, right? A small language model can actually do the case, just as well for that specific need. How about we start becoming smarter and maybe putting an AI gateway in place that will route these queries to the appropriate place. In some cases where we need some deep thinking or we're trying to go into a new market, sure, take advantage of much more advanced frontier model. In some other cases, we're literally going and checking information in a database and getting a response back from it. Well, there's no need necessarily to take advantage of something like that. And so we started becoming smarter with regard to trying to understand what our spend is, per, let's say, task or per sweat of inquiries that we're doing, and realizing, look, you can start becoming much more efficient with regard to how we can do this. And so that was our realization as we went through the process on our own. And then we also realized every customer is going to be at some stage of trying to optimize in the same fashion. We might be a little bit further ahead than most of our customers. At least that's what the industry analysts have been telling us. But I can't imagine, right? Customers are too far behind when they go through something similar. And so the idea to be able to get smarter with regard to the work that needs to get done and how to go off and apportion that to the appropriate model that can help serve that, and then do that in a much more efficient fashion across the entire sort of work you can do, is something that not only are we doing today, but we hope to make sure that we have a blueprint for our customers to take advantage of going forward.
Got it. Oh, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of leads to another thread maybe we can pull a little bit somewhat related. And also, I think a big theme I heard when I was with you guys last month. And that is some of the DNA of obviously Red Hat is open source and openness, and what that actually means technologically and culturally, what that actually means to what does open mean and open source. And there's a lot of meaning behind that. And a lot of that is sort of in the AI world that it sort of translates into a point of view that basically says that in order for AI to deliver value in the real business world, it can't be sort of like a proprietary black box, right? It can't, right? It's like you're choking the oxygen out of it. It must be grounded in collaboration and transparency and choice. A lot of the key pillars of open source. And I'm trying to reconcile, some of the most capable frontier models that I've seen are in fact deeply proprietary. And I'm curious how you think about it, and how and if a lot of the folks in this community are they're end users, they're you might say buyers, or they're influencers within the CIO organization, right? And they're trying to navigate this. And I'm curious, like, how would you guide these people? Are you asking them perhaps to accept capability trade-offs, as an example, in exchange for openness, right? Is there a trade-off there, or can they have it all? And tell me a little bit about how that's evolving.
Yeah, really insightful question,
Yeah.
Mark. And the challenge with this, like in so many things in AI, right? The answer I give you today might be obsolete in
Yes.
3 to 6 months, right? Just because the rate of change is so great. So
Yep.
uh, look, there was a period of time, right, where when, and I guess it's still true, right? High rate of change or
Mm-hmm.
acceleration with regard to capabilities that are being developed in these proprietary or frontier models. And then, potential open alternatives, right? Whether they came from, like Meta-sponsored Llama, or from, one of the Chinese companies, working on it, right? You have, European provider as well, right? Sort of all providing different solutions. And then different companies go through different, if you will, stages on this front, right? Some companies choose to say, well, I was open, I'll become less open. We've seen an open version being released by OpenAI as well. We're starting to see some interest with regard to providers from around the world, right? Sovereignty concerns we've noticed have gone up quite a lot, right? So different governments around the world are funding companies in this front. Some I believe will proprietary. A lot of them will actually be open, right? Because it's in the best interest of those countries to do
Yep.
that, to be able to spur innovation, right? So what we tell customers is, look, it's really difficult for us to predict how this will shake out.
Right.
We're in this, and we're in this, every day. It's really difficult for the average customer then to really realize how, this will all shake out. Having said that, what we can do is we can prepare for a world, right, which will be constantly changing, right? And so then how do you future-proof your environment to take advantage of this sort of change that's going on around you? We're also partnering with companies like, for example, an NVIDIA, that's trying to push and say, hey, look, can I, provide more open models to the world, while at the same time also providing, GPUs that power all the models, right, or all the applications that are being built out, right? So, in some sense, making sure it's supporting both aspects of that. We want to make sure customers can take advantage of advancements. Like, why would we not want customers to take advantage of all the progress? Let's say an AI model or a lab has made. But at the same time, right, we are also advising them to make sure, hey, look, if a small language model and open model can best do your task, you should make sure that you have an architecture that helps you do that as well. When you take advantage of some of these environments, right, and then I will get to the agentic part of it.
Yep.
And this is again another area we're collaborating with NVIDIA on, right? Is look, you've got to also make sure that you think about what potential challenges that you can put in place in environments. So, can we ensure that you're running, these agentic environments in a sandbox, so it's completely isolated and protected? Can you make sure that that there are security implications that you're aware of? So, for example, these agents that you're allowing them to do a bunch of tasks, right? Do you have an identity associated with them? Can you trace the activity that's done? Can you make sure you can log in so it's auditable going forward? There's a
Mm.
whole host of new requirements that also come up that we want to make sure that we support it, regardless of whether you've got some proprietary agents or you build your own agents or you take them from somewhere else and then have a common environment and a framework to run it. So in many ways, our approach to this is the same that we've had for Linux, the same that we had for containers and Kubernetes. Let's make sure that we can provide you an open framework that works with both proprietary choices that you make as well as open ones that are here today as well as ones that will come tomorrow, and then do that in a most efficient possible way.
Got it. No, I love that. I love that. So I'm curious, Ashesh, you're in a role, a product role, and which is an important leadership position at Red Hat. And I've done some work as product leader in various roles, and it is an area I'm very interested in intellectually. And I'm also tracking what a lot of the analysts are saying about AI as a in context, right? AI in the context of sort of macro technology trends, right? And I think Forrester was the one who has called AI the seventh wave of technology change or something like that. And you've been through a few waves as in your journey, certainly with Red Hat alone, on-prem to cloud, virtual machines to Kubernetes, and now AI. And what happens is, I think if you buy into that model that, each wave displaces some of what the previous wave built, right? And in sort of a natural evolutionary way. And I'm curious, is there any part of put your CPO hat on, which is the one you wear, is there any part of Red Hat's portfolio that concerns you or keeps you up at night, so to speak? Not because it's failing or it's weak or anything, but because the wave that we're in might make it irrelevant faster than you would like.
This is a fascinating discussion, right? This is
Yeah.
one that we'll have to be careful what to watch time on because we could go on for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's just roll back again, right?
Yeah.
Because history, right? To me, history is always instructive, right?
Yeah.
It may not, in our case, maybe it doesn't repeat itself. It'll certainly rhyme. When we started going down the path in OpenShift, and I'm the founding GM of the OpenShift business, right? When we kicked off this project in 2012, right? There were a lot of these companies in this PaaS area, right? Platform as a service, broadly defined, and all trying to sort of figure out, what the opportunity was, right? To your point, Mark, public cloud was on. At Red Hat, we want to make sure that we're supporting public cloud, but we always believed that look, not everything can move to the cloud 100%. Again,
Right.
in retrospect, right, that seems like an obvious thing. Your listeners may or may not remember. There was a time when people were like, I'm going 100% into public cloud, right? And that was
Yep.
the mantra, right? Everyone was sort of rushing. And we're like,
Yep.
not really sure that can happen. And so around that same time, right, we also had a movement around, you may or may not remember this, right? 12-factor apps, right? Oh, everything's going to be stateless and everyone's going to, build this, focus on developer and, it's all going to be wonderful. And you say, well, there's going to be 12-factor stateless apps, but there will be stateful apps, right? There'll be room for, new cloud native, these containerized apps, but you'll have existing, legacy apps that you'll want to make sure that you also run in the same environment.
Mm.
And so we made a bet at that time to say, look, containers are going to be, where companies are going to drive forward because we believe that'll then become the unit that's portable, right, across a hybrid cloud environment, right? You can run
Yeah.
this, you actually can run in a virtual machine, and we do today, right? And then you can, make sure you run that in a hybrid cloud. By running it in a public cloud, you can run it on your own data center on premise. And then, of course, once you start running it in all these environments, right, you want to be able to make sure you manage this in a distributed fashion, right, which is where sort of Kubernetes came along. And, we went in really early with Google on that project. Now, at the time, extremely difficult decision to make, right, because we were not 100% public cloud. We made the explicit choice to say we live in a hybrid cloud environment. We also made the choice at that time, which sort of bucked the philosophy at that time, which was, everything's going to become, these stateless microservices based application that'll run, right? And we said, well, no, there's going to be room for all manner and all variety of applications. And then we re-architected the platform completely to go natively embrace Docker and Kubernetes, and we were the first platform at the time to do it, right? Now, in hindsight, it's like, oh, well, that was an obvious thing to do at the time, right? If that bet doesn't pay off, Mark, I'm not having this conversation with you today,
Yeah.
right? That was pretty much, bet the future for, where we think that business was going. Now, in of course, in hindsight, that turned out to be a good bet. OpenShift's a 2 billion ARR business today, right? So it's come a long way. And then that decision also set up the platform for what we build our entire AI infrastructure on. These models, these applications that are getting built for this AI world, or these agents, as we described them today, are effectively all running in containers. This is sort of the next generation of cloud native apps, or these container apps, right? That we are now addressing, and they're all getting built on the same platform that we put down. So that Linux platform that helped us, put us in place to be able to create, an OpenShift platform that we can run in this hybrid cloud is also now the basis for the AI platform that we put on top. So now back to your question, right? So what sort of worries me, or keeps me up on this front, is that it's clear, right? AI is the biggest change we've seen in technology in, I'm going to say, past 2 decades, right? The impact that it has, is tremendous, right? I mean, you can argue that it feels like it's similar to when, the internet first came about. It feels like it has that kind of power. Is to make sure that each one of the products, each one of the technologies that we have, right, is not only supporting the existing environments, or what I'm going to call the traditional legacy apps, but is also being able to support, everything that's happening in the AI world. So what does that mean? Can we make sure that they have MCP support? In the case of, let's say, Ansible, at Red Hat Summit, you probably saw this, Mark, right? We announced the fact that Ansible is going to support not only the ability to be able to help the existing environment that it has today, but it's also going to be able to support, AI-based workflows, right? So essentially provide, deterministic governance to the option that you have to be able to run playbooks, but then also be able to make sure that you're able to execute them in the AI native workflows that you put in place. And so from my perspective, I really want to make sure that our entire portfolio is in a place to be able to support this forward motion that we have from an AI front while supporting our existing customers. And then that trade-off, right? That set of, trade-off that you've got to make from a product capability perspective, right? That's something that anyone who's interested in product strategy really has to be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, that's the art and science and, brain power, right? In terms of that balance, because it's not a single variable equation, right? There's
Yeah.
lots of moving parts. Yep.
It's multivariable, and it's also, right, changing over a period of time, right?
Yes.
So, there's not really a whole set of constants, right, to deal with
Yep.
on that front. And I think that's what, makes it both interesting and exciting.
No doubt. No doubt, Ashesh. You're in a great spot, and it's just you could feel the energy at the summit, and just kind of where you guys are making bets, and it was resonating. So, and that was my first summit, so I hope to be back. But that
Well,
was
Mark, I hope you managed to also catch. I mean, it's really important to us, right, that we
yeah,
highlighted all these customers,
yes,
right? And so we had, a lot of customer stories from around the world, in every area, right? There's all these customers migrating over to virtualization, sovereign
oh
clouds
yes,
become a thing, right? So we had, customers, that were highlighted on that front. And then, of course, just users of the product and technology,
oh
right?
yes.
Whether it's partners and so on. So that is a big part of it.
Yeah, in fact, it's one of my goals with this particular podcast is to capture some of those voices as well as the customers, the end customers across the board, right? Not just
Yeah.
obviously Red Hat customers, but everybody who's
Right.
in a seat like a CIO or a chief, even a chief AI or data or enterprise apps or infrastructure, right? Or security, all of the core
Yeah.
pillars of really enterprise IT, and hear what they're struggling with, right? And why they've made the choices they've made, and which ones they regret and which ones they don't. And that's, some of those are, and honestly, I saw that at the summit. And I learned a lot, even in hallway conversations with
Yeah.
some of these guys.
That's
So I,
motivational, right? I mean, we had
yeah,
Motorola Solutions come and talk about this,
yes,
life-saving 911 work, they're
yeah,
doing. And then
yes,
you
I
have
remember that.
Telenor, right? Telenor talking about, wow, we're like a traditional telco company, and now we're going to become, an AI provider. And then you had Verizon. I mean, just the whole, I mean, that always excites me, right? Because you build these things, right? Because
Yeah,
you want customers to use them, and then customers, and they have pride with regard to, hey, I'm, using this technology to
yeah.
really make a difference, right? To whoever it is that they serve. I think that's super powerful and motivating for all of us.
It's the most powerful voice, and you can just step aside and let them tell your story.
Right, right,
Right, right,
right.
right. Well, let's finish with a few quick ones. We oftentimes call this the speed round, Ashesh. Just a couple questions to dismount, but this has been awesome. So let's do this. I got three of them for you, and I'm just going to rattle them off. First one is on-prem, public cloud, or you generally don't care as long as it's open.
Ooh, I feel like I'm in like one of the hot seat and
Hot seat, hot seat.
yeah. Um, honestly, the Red Hat position has always been, we'll support you regardless of what choice you make, right?
Yep,
So bare metal, public cloud, private cloud, out to the edge,
yep.
right? Increasingly, these agents are running, pretty much in every single environment, right? And we want to make sure consistent platform, consistent APIs across every one of those choices that customers make.
Got it. Got it. Let's talk about acquisitions for a minute. You mentioned Neural Magic a moment ago. You've also, I think, been around for StackRox and CoreOS and FuseSource, and I'm curious, like, if you were to, I don't know, if you were to rank those, or if you were to spotlight maybe the smartest one, the best one, the biggest payoff, what do you think is the most monumental or material acquisition that has been recently made by Red Hat?
Oh, that's a tough one, right? That's like asking me.
Pick your
It's like
child.
rather than picking a product, I'm picking a child. I think I'll say this, which sometimes folks, may not fully understand Red Hat. Any company that we acquire, right, we make sure that if it has an open source technology, that we work with that, group that's coming in and go off and open source it. Now, it might take us some time, right? Just, to do that, to make sure we're doing it the right way, but we'll always do that, right? And so I think, from our perspective, right, any company that, isn't, fully in that mindset, when they come in, we want to make sure that they go off and embrace it. So from that perspective, I think each one of those companies that you mentioned has taken us into a different part of,
Okay.
the acquisitions are in some sense like they're technology complements to the work we're
Yep.
doing,
Yep.
right? So CoreOS, we brought them in and we said, optimized, operating system and environment for containerized
Mhm.
environments. We said, well, we want to add security to that. StackRox came in there. And then now we've got Neural Magic to go off and bolster our AI plans. So I think each one of those helps us grow our story in different ways.
Got it. Got it. That's okay. I'm going to let you off. That's an okay answer. I know it was an oversimplification, but I like it. I like it. All right, last one. Linux or Kubernetes, which one would you say changed the industry more?
Oh, that's a tough one. Now you're really asking me to pick. Oh my gosh. Look, Red Hat's been built on Linux, right?
Yeah.
And our Linux platform is the foundation for our Kubernetes offering,
Hmm.
right? So for us, Linux is the bedrock of, everything that we
Hmm.
do. Having said that, right, we call them layered products, right? We sort of have them, built on top of each other. Um, by doing the work that we've done, with Kubernetes, we've also expanded the Linux footprint into new areas, right? So, Mark, you saw some of the customers come and speak on the Red Hat stage. They were longtime Linux users and customers, and now they feel comfortable and confident to use our Kubernetes offering. So, I feel it's sort of hard to choose because you, s-
Yeah.
you you can't you can't do the Kubernetes part of the Linux, and the Linux part helps the Kubernetes become more effective, and distributed at scale. So the two
Yeah.
sort of, for peanut butter and jelly. How about
I get you. No, I know it's an impossible question to answer, but and it's not just a binary answer either. But I knew that going in. But I appreciate the honesty and the candor there, Ashesh. And as always, the time has gone by, right? So we are at time. But I would love to circle back with you. When is, maybe just for our listeners, when is the what is the summit schedule for the next 12 months? Is it coming back around in 27, or do you have any details on that?
Yeah, great question. So we have Summit again next year in May, and I'm sure we can get the
Okay.
details for your
So it's
listeners.
it's it's a 1 year later.
But
Okay.
yeah, it's 1 year, it's annual. But what we do
Yep.
have, Mark, is we have these things called Summit Connects.
Okay.
And those are around the world, right? So
Hmm.
there will be one, starting I think this summer and then going through for the next 6 months. There will
Okay.
be one in one, part of, some large city or area in different parts of the world. They attract hundreds, in
Mm.
some cases over 1,000 people
Mm.
will go to them, and they're like mini versions of our Red Hat Summit, and so they'll
Yep.
likely be playing at a city or an area near you
That's
sometime.
great. That's awesome. That gives a chance for the community to come together in between. Yeah, that's great.
Right.
That's great. Ashesh, thank you for coming together with us and our community on this day. And I hope it's not the last time. Would love to keep in touch with you guys and certainly see you out there in person. But thank you everyone for paying attention and keeping us on your radar in the world of podcasts. Thank you for being part of the Enterprise Edge community. And good luck to all the teams in the round of 32, which is fast approaching. Congratulations to Lionel Messi for being the World Cup all-time goal-scoring leader as of this afternoon. He scored twice, and he's now got 18 goals. And with that, we will catch everyone on the next episode. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mark.